Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are going to be continuing on from where we left off in our previous video about biomes. And so this will be kind of biomes part 2 today. And in our previous video, we talked about the fact that biomes are these large communities of plants and animals that occupy a very distinct region of the world. So they have it's areas of the world that have such similarities that we kind of have to group it together. And we can either have terrestrial biomes, which are biomes that are on land, or we can have aquatic biomes, which are biomes that are in water. And we can have either freshwater biomes or saltwater biomes. We took a brief look at this map here, which shows really that where we live in New Hampshire, up here in kind of the northeast area of North America, uh, this map indicates that we live actually in the taiga, but uh, I would tend to disagree with that a little bit, as I mentioned in the last video. I would argue instead that New Hampshire is probably more similar, at least southern New Hampshire is more similar to the temperate deciduous forest. Certainly, we live um, right near the border between the two. And with biomes, it's not like countries that have these political boundaries that have been agreed upon by two governments or the governments of the world, that this is where the two countries begin and end. But biomes, different scientists will put the border lines in different places. It's not a set type of thing like political boundaries are. We can even have different names for different biomes. So in this case, I would say we tend to live in the temperate deciduous forest where there are a lot of large hardwood trees. So again, you're filling this in on those little charts there with the different biomes, with the pictures of the biomes, and then that you'll be coloring, and then places for you to write information underneath. So you probably want to put down hardwood trees. Also, uh, trees lose their leaves, and of course, we know that that is about to happen here. So, hardwood trees that lose their leaves, things like oaks, ash trees, birch, maple, all kinds of those deciduous trees that lose their leaves. Um, Typically, in a temperate deciduous forest, there are 4 seasons, and that is what we're accustomed to. Not everywhere in the world has 4 seasons. Some have 2 seasons, the wet season and the dry season. We have four. We have summer, spring, winter, fall. So, and generally, there's somewhere between 2 and 6 feet of precipitation every year, whether that be in the form of rain or snow or sleet or whatever it might be, but somewhere in that vicinity in an average year. And the animals that are in this area would be things like deer and rabbit and beaver, and we could name all kinds of them, but that's just a little sampling, right? All right, so that is temperate deciduous forest. I think if you look at that description, you look at the picture there, it looks a lot like our area. Grasslands. Sometimes the grasslands are called savannas, depending on where you are. So the grasslands that are on the continent of Africa, for instance, are often called savannas. Grasslands here in North America are typically just called grasslands. So it kind of depends on where you are, what kind of term we use. Also, the grasslands here in America are quite different from the grasslands on the continent of Africa, which is why we give those slightly different names, but they are very similar in some ways in that they have deep-rooted grasses and deep-rooted trees, although there's not always a lot of trees. So deep-rooted grasses is the big thing. It's typically quite hot most of the year, especially in the savanna, as opposed to maybe the American grasslands, although it can be very hot there, just not always year-round. There can be torrential downpours at times. Usually the rain comes in bunches. It's not kind of scattered over the course of the whole year like it is for us. The soil is really fertile for growing crops. So here in America, that's where most of our really big farms are. And then some of the animals that can live there, cattle, certainly if we're talking about the United States, zebra, lions, giraffe. If we're talking about the savannas of Africa or even Asia in some cases, some of these animals would live there. Um, so these are the types of animals that would be found in a grassland or savanna biome. Our next biome is desert. So a desert has very little rainfall or precipitation. That's what defines a desert. Typically, they are hot and arid. Um, Technically speaking, even like Antarctica, which of course is freezing cold, is a desert because of its lack of precipitation. But most of the time, when we're talking about a desert, we're talking about a hot, dry climate. Arid means dry. So it covers about 20% of the Earth's surface. That would not include the part of the Earth's surface that's covered by ocean. That's just 20% of the land surface. And it includes things like cactus, scorpions, snakes, lizards. I don't know if you've ever seen any video of some of those little lizards that are forever picking up their feet so their feet don't burn on the hot sand, but those are really cute videos. The rainforest. Rainforest is our next biome. The rainforest is our most diverse biome. In other words, it has the most different kinds of um, species that live in this area. It has more different kinds of trees than any other area, more different kinds of other plants, more different kinds of animals than other areas. It's just very diverse. It gets a lot of rainfall, of course, which is why it's called a rainforest. Uh, excuse me, it only covers about 6% of the earth. However, rainforests are home to nearly half of all the various species that live on Earth. And so this kind of proves that whole diverse biome argument. Uh, and it does a very good job of it because almost half of the different species that can be found here on Earth can be found in a rainforest. A lot of products come from the rainforest, such as medicines, and which we can create from different plants and things that live there. Um, Fruit, lumber, tea, all of these types of things come from the rainforest. They're typically located near the equator. That's not true 100% of the time, but most of the rainforests of the world are located not far from the equator. And then, of course, we have animals like monkeys and birds and snakes and small animals. And again, 50% of the species that live on Earth, plant, animal, bacteria, whatever it may be, live in the rainforest. So we can't, of course, come anywhere near to naming all the variety of animals that live there. But this gives us a little bit of an idea. The last biome that we're going to look at is the Earth's oceans. The Earth's oceans, which of course would be a saltwater biome. And this covers about 70% of the Earth's surface. It, of course, is made of salt water. We are very familiar with that. And water temperature depends on global location. So while we call the Earth's oceans a biome, um, typically a biome has like similar temperatures and things. The ocean, not so much because it's so spread out. So, when you get to Arctic areas, the water, of course, is much colder than the water near the equator. So temperatures are a little more diverse in the ocean biome. And of course, we have snakes and fish, kelp and coral, rays, all of these uh, different species live here. I'm not sure I love the word coexist there because that would seem to indicate in some form or fashion that they all get along. Not so much. If they did, they would not have anything to eat. So So they say coexist. I would just say they all live there. Sorry, I was going to go back for just a second. I love this picture because obviously this is in a more tropical area of the ocean, not necessarily an Arctic part of the ocean, but I just think it's such a beautiful picture. Right, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, you're going to need to put away the notes that had the different types of biomes with the pictures that you were filling in there. And we're going to go back to the regular fill in the blank notes and take a look at some of the sections that we didn't go over before, such as biomes over time. And so we see here that the survival and well-being of a biome and its organisms really depends on the relationship of different biomes throughout the world and um, all the different species that live there and different events that happen there. And so, if there are changes in one part of the world, it can actually have an effect on biomes of another part of the world. For instance, if there's a volcanic eruption somewhere, that ash gets into the atmosphere and it starts spreading out throughout the world, it can actually affect the weather on the other side of the world if it happened to be a very large volcanic eruption, or um, changes in what kinds of organisms are in one biome can change another biome along that border, and that can begin to creep its way further and further into a neighboring biome. So when changes happen in one part of the world, it doesn't affect just that part of the world. It can actually spread. Um, so when we see like an increase or a decrease of a species of an animal or plant, that can cause this like ripple effect of change, a domino effect, almost like in other parts of the environment or other parts of the world. And so I mentioned a minute ago, like a volcano, like we see here in this picture. So, a volcanic eruption in Mexico can actually change the temperature of the whole world for a few degrees for a few years if it's a large volcanic eruption, because the ash in the air changes, can help, block out some of the sun's rays. Uh, Even just a little bit can change the temperature. Not only that, but it also affects rainfall because droplets of rain will tend to form around the ash in the air. Now we're going to take a quick look at microhabitats. Microhabitats are really cool. So they're kind of like their own little ecosystem, but they're super tiny. They're very small. So we went from talking about giant biomes. First, we talked about ecosystems, which are pretty good size, to giant biomes, which take up large portions of the world. Now we're going to look at microhabitats, which are very, very small parts of the environment, but they support very distinct flora and fauna, or plants and animals. So we're talking about organisms that may be able to live and thrive in one microhabitat, but like 2 centimeters away in a different habitat, they wouldn't make it. So, animals that live under a log, or insects or things that live under a log, if that log were carried off by somebody, suddenly that microhabitat is destroyed. Those little critters can't survive um, out in the open, or under a rock, or uh, you know there are just these little tiny micro habitats, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity at some point to be able to observe some of these micro habitats, take a really close look at these little areas outside where you might have certain things living that couldn't live just a few feet or few centimeters away. So things like a shady area under a tree, or underneath a rock that's in a stream, the underside of a rotting log, or the top or bottom of a leaf even. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, this has been our look at ecosystems, and then biomes and microhabitats, as we continue to look at these both um, in activities, but also in the outdoors. I hope that you gain a better appreciation for just the incredible world that God has made.